gentlemen, and welcome to the time-traveling newscast, CMQ. This evening we'll be reporting live from the Cuban and French revolutions. Most of us know that the Cuban Revolution was led by a man named Fidel Castro. But just who was he anyway, Brooke-Ann?
Good evening, Dakota. We're reporting live from 1959 in Cuba, so we're in the right place to explain. It's just after the revolution. Fidel Castro is a very powerful Cuban leader, and he would go on to rule here as dictator for 50 years. He has just come into power and has promised democracy and freedom for the Cuban people, who hoped he would get rid of the corrupt government of Fulgencio Batista.
Unfortunately, Castro has not been able to do that. Instead, he has killed most of Batista's supporters and even some people who didn't support him, just because he suspected they did. Castro has not set up a democratic government, but instead has put in place a communist government. It's supposed to allow equality for everyone, but doesn't do that. The rulers have ended up with most of the power, while ordinary citizens have little.
So what was happening in Cuba before Castro?
Before Castro, Batista had declared himself the president. He'd signed the Treaty of Relations with the U.S. in 1934, and since then the U.S. had supported him for economic reasons. Batista was an iron-fisted ruler who became more violent and corrupt as time went on.
What was happening in Cuba at this time that helped Castro come into power?
This was 1952, when Castro was running for the Cuban Congress. Suddenly, Batista canceled elections and declared himself president. Castro took up arms to overthrow Batista's government, but was arrested and imprisoned for 2 years. After getting out of prison, Castro was in exile in Mexico, where he met Che Guevara, a revolutionary fighter from Argentina. While there, Castro planned an armed invasion of Cuba.
How did the revolution actually start?
By 1956, Castro had returned to Cuba with a small revolutionary organization that he had formed. Cuban planes killed most of this small army, but Castro managed to get away. For 3 years, he and his supporters fought from the Sierra Maestra mountains before they were able to overthrow Batista. At this point, he declared himself the deliverer and took over the Cuban government. At first, everyone was happy because Castro promised to restore Cuba's constitution and hold free elections.
Now that Castro has taken over, what has Batista done?
He has fled the country with his family because he's afraid of Castro's supporters. He knows they want to get rid of him for the corrupt, violent way he had ruled this country. By the time Batista died in 1973, his reputation was completely ruined. So today, soon after Castro has taken power, he and Che Guevara are unfairly trying and executing Batista's supporters. So much for their freedom. This country is in turmoil.
We move now to 1789, where we join our reporters live from France.
What are you seeing of the French Revolution, Brooke-Ann?
I'm reporting live from the Women's March on Versailles, where the Royal Chateau is located. It's October 1789. Here in France, mothers have been watching their children starve to death. They have been watching the cost of everything go up so high that they are not able to afford the things they need just to keep their families alive.
It was impossible to grow enough crops to pay taxes and also buy enough food to survive. All of this has motivated the women to march on Versailles, the palace of the monarchy. They are coming together and demanding change, rioting over the scarcity of bread and how expensive it is when it can be found. They want their rulers to stop being blind to their hardships.
We have heard that some people also took action earlier this year by storming the Bastille. I don't understand why the peasants would storm a prison. Can you tell us what happened?
Yes, you are correct. On July 14th of this year, 1789, citizens stormed the Bastille prison. Don't forget, this was also a symbol of the difference between the classes. The citizens stormed it because they were angry. They wanted gunpowder to fight against the government, so they stormed the Bastille, where it was stored. They were fed up for being taxed so heavily.
Why are they taxed if they can't even afford food?
First, they need to pay for their investment in the American Revolution and the 7-Year War. These two wars have left them with huge debts, yet the monarchy is not willing to cut back on their lavish spending. The French people are furious. They have been paying taxes to the king and the church and dues to the lord of the manor. Just as in feudal times, they're paying through labor, not money. They're also paying many taxes on wine, salt, and bread. Not only that, but they also have to pay tax based on the number of people in their family.
What's been happening as the result of all this overtaxing?
Many of the people who are responsible for growing the food are among those paying too many taxes. This means that they have to give most, if not all, of the crops they grew to the lord of the manor in order to pay their share of the taxes. And what does that leave the common people? More hunger and starvation that continues to fuel their desire for revolution.
Stop overtaxing the common people.
Help us afford our next meal.
Why do we want this?
It's ruining the lives of the poor.
Why should we suffer for the government's problems?
The government hurts us and takes what we have.
Help us to stop the brutality of the government taking what we earn.
Help reduce taxes so we can afford our next meal. Take action now. For more information, call 1-802-563-2289 and make a difference.
Make a difference.
Brooklyn and Billie Jean, join us now, back from their time-traveling news report. I'm seeing some connections between this revolution and the Cuban Revolution. What connections are you noticing, Billie Jean?
There are definitely connections. In the French Revolution, the people revolted against the monarchy because they were so wealthy and the peasants so poor. And in Cuba, the people revolted against Batista's dictatorship because he was corrupt and oppressed them. The people there were going without while Batista and his men had plenty.
Yes, France was actually very well off, but only the aristocracy benefited from this prosperity. The same was true in Cuba. Only the rulers enjoyed the wealth. Everyone else suffered and starved. In both cases, it's clear that when driven to desperation, people will do what they have to do to survive. Sometimes this means they have to revolt.
What lessons can be learned from these times?
If we can prevent the conditions that lead to revolutions, we will be able to prevent revolutions themselves. This will save a lot of lives. Everyone could enjoy life without fighting for their lives and beliefs.
What do you think about all this revolting?
I think revolution could become unnecessary if people tried to solve their differences by being fair and equal in what they do. The only way we can prevent history from repeating itself is to learn from the mistakes of the past. We all need to consider what has been done before and think about if we really want it to happen again. That's all we have for tonight. Thank you for joining us.